before we wrap it up, I gotta know, man. I gotta know. People want to know. When I first got to WWE, I gotta know. When I first got to WWE, Bruce Pritchard, he talked about it. You know what I mean? And you and we never talked about it. You know what I mean? I gotta know. When I first got to WWE, you remember that?
Yeah. I
came to the ring, jumped over the barrier. Steve Austin, dropped him on the table. Boom. Big debut. Booker T's in and whatnot. I leave the arena that night. I don't know why we didn't talk. I can't remember why, but I do know I left the arena. What happened? Bruce Pritchard called me. I'm on my way to the next town. Bruce Pritchard said, "Hey man, what was going on?" I say, "Man, it was a great night tonight. I'm excited, man. I'm in the WWE." He goes, "No, man, you didn't hear what happened." I go, "No, what are you talking about?" He goes, "No, you broke Steve's hand." And I go, "Broke Steve's hand?" He goes, "Yeah, man, you need to, you gotta fix it." I go, "Fix what? What are you talking about?" He goes, "Man, nah, man, you gotta fix it, man." I said, "Well, give me Steve's number and let me call him. This is my debut, WWE." I said, "Let me call Steve and let me apologize for breaking this man's hand because that wasn't my intention." You know what I mean? I do remember seeing you hit the top of the announce table and bouncing off. I remember that. But he goes, "No, you need to meet Steve at his hotel room tomorrow, man. And, you need to pack his bags to the hotel, man, because, man, we got to fix this." And I look at, I tell Richard on the phone, I go, "Hold him up. I ain't packing no goddamn bags." I call him, you know what I mean? But give me your insight on that story.
Well, here's the thing. I had heard that story told many times, almost just like that. And first of all, had you called me to pack my bags, I would have said, "No, I got it," because nobody has ever carried my bags. Nobody's ever packed my bags but me. But there was never no heat. But here's the deal, Book. If I remember correctly, that was at Meadowlands Arena in New Jersey, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, yep. You picked me up over the shoulder, bam, I hit the table. The deal was, I was so slippery from being so sweaty. You know how those tables are. You never know what they're going to do. Well, what happened was when I flat backed on that table, I just skipped off like someone skimming a rock off a surface of a pond, right? And when I did, my lower back hit the legs of one of those announcers' chairs, with all the padding on them. So it's a heavy-duty chair. So what happened was I'd broken 3 transverse processes in my back, those things that stick out. All 3 of them just snapped over. So my hand was never broken. I broke those 3 bones in my back, and I went to the back. And, man, I was like, God damn, man. It wasn't nothing you did. It was the way the bump went. And so you put me perfect on the table. I just skipped off. But I had broken 3 bones in my back, and I kept telling the guys, I said, "Listen, man," I said, "there's something wrong with me." I said, "My back's got to be broke." And so they took me to the hospital. Whether it was that night or when I went home, I can't remember. And I got an x-ray. Well, they didn't turn the x-ray machine up high enough, so they couldn't see nothing. They said, "No, man, you're fine." And I said, "I'm telling you, man, there's something wrong with my back." So I went to San Antonio when I was living. And sure enough, I go in there, they turn the x-ray up to a proper damn, whatever setting for my girth. And said, "No, you got good news and bad news." And said, "The bad news is you broke 3 of the transverse processes in your back. But the good news is when they fold over, we just leave them like that. So we're not going to fix it. They'll just heal up and you'll be fine." So then from that day forward, I started going back to TV. There would be a doctor waiting for me in the dressing room before every show. And this is kind of leading into when I started doing a lot of the comedy stuff with Kurt Angle, because the doctor would be in there. We'd meet in the bathroom. I'd have 60 milligrams of Toradol shot in my ass. Now, Toradol is a it's a pain blocker.
Non-narcotic, yeah.
Yeah, it's non-narcotic pain blocker, but it works like a mug. It's like a miracle drug. So before the shows, every show where I was on the road or if I was working a tag or whatever, until my back healed up, someone was shooting me full of Toradol. And that's why I started doing those comedy skits with Kurt, because I couldn't get no heat. Because I was hurt, I couldn't do anything to
I never
anybody.
knew that, man. I swear, man. I never knew that, man.
No, you never broke my hand.
Bro.
No, you never broke my hand. And when you put me through the table, it wasn't your fault. I hit the table. I skipped off. It was just a fluke that my back hit the chair.
You know what? If I remember, man. If I remember, and my thing is, I don't remember a whole lot of stuff, about wrestling and wrestling spots, but I remember that night vividly, and I remember going over that, and they told me, okay, what's going to happen is, I remember going over it, they're going to remove everything, they take the TVs out, take the top off, and none of that was done, and boom, I hit, and all of that stuff was still, so when you landed right on that little top part, which shouldn't have been there, and I thought those TVs should have been removed as well, and that's what I remember and to this day, man, we never talked about that, and I've heard several stories. Like I said, Bruce told that story to me, but I do remember hearing JR tell this story that you just said, and that's the first time I had ever heard about it. So I just want to hear from you, man, because I always wondered about that.
I know, and I love Bruce Pritchard, and he helped me out tremendously when I was in WWE, but that's not the correct story. And Bruce is a premier storyteller. He grew up watching Houston wrestling just like you and me did.
That's the problem. I think that's the problem. Bruce just trying to get some material for his show. That's all. That's what it was.
Controversy creates cash, which is a book written by Eric Bischoff. But no, he's got the story. Now, Bruce is a great storyteller. I consider him a good friend. But no, he had the story wrong. It was my back, and there was never no heat with you and me, because all of a sudden I started seeing some Twitter stuff. This is a year or two ago, whatever it was. All of a sudden, I'm supposed to be. You're supposed to be carrying my bags and shit like this, and I was like, no, that's bullshit. That never happened. You and me never had no heat, and